Welcome, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Brendan Sullivan, and today I'm going to talk to you about the industry priorities, where they're, the specific aspects of that related to air cargo, and then get into some of the things that we've delivered over the course of the year and why that's important for the globe as a whole. So, what are these industry priorities? What are they? What is specific about them for air cargo? The first is around digitalization. And really here, it's the move from legacy messaging and the legacy messaging standard, which was focused around digitizing a paper document, to a data sharing approach using modern web APIs. It's much more efficient, it's much more effective. And my colleague Henk is actually going to go into detail on that one. In terms of sustainability, obviously we're supporting the industry's net zero commitments. Additionally, we want to increase efficiency and reduce waste inside the air cargo operations. So I'll touch on what we're doing in those specific areas around on the ground. And lastly, when it comes to safety and security, securing and facilitating cross-border movements. So that's both the safety aspects for things like dangerous goods and lithium batteries, as well as the customs and facilitation movements that we have around the globe and how they're kind of mixing as we move forwards. So I think Rachel covered this extremely well, but and maybe it's not that the challenges are mounting, but that the challenges are actually continuing. So for example, the war in the Ukraine has grounded some of the key players. It's disrupted supply chains. It's not the only geopolitical issue that we've seen, but it is certainly one of them that's affected us in this year. There is continued economic volatility, which has brought on inflation, a weaker trading environment, shifting currency rates, and slower GDP growth overall, which is affecting consumers more generally. And lastly, if we look at another region of the world, there are still concerns on how China's supply chain is developing when supply chain and manufacturing companies talk about de-risking their supply chain and how they may be moving around. These developments are still ongoing, so it's an area of challenge that we continue to monitor. On the plus side, on the positive side, e-commerce absolutely continues to grow, and it continues to be a significant driver for air cargo. With that comes these shorter delivery times. The e-commerce demand is speed, and air cargo can absolutely deliver that. And it requires cooperation from governments to improve those delivery times, reduce any dwell that might exist inside the supply chain. There has been a very strong rebound and incredible resilience in this industry on passenger traffic, which brought with it more belly capacity, which is available for cargo. So that's still a positive development. And lastly, the high-value specialized cargo, so looking at pharmaceutical products, as an example, are proving resistant to some of these economic ups and downs that we've been seeing. So on digitalization, as I mentioned, Henk Mulder is going to go into detail on this one. And what I wanted to focus on here is just to call out and use an example of PLACI. PLACI is preloading advanced cargo information, and it is a specific data set that is shared along the supply chain with the customs authorities to perform an additional layer of security. So it's where customs is actually performing security risk assessments prior to loading. Now, what we have is a number of these different PLACI regimes being implemented throughout the world. The latest was in Europe with the movement towards EU's ICS2 system, but we are seeing in the UAE, in Canada, and there are existing programs as well. What we need to do and what we need to make sure happens is that these programs, one, achieve their objective of this additional layer of security, but do not impact cargo flows. They don't slow down, and they don't create friction at borders and at transit points. And for that to occur, governments absolutely must work closely together to deploy a PLACI program. We have a number of examples where freight may move across multiple PLACI regimes, and if those programs are not aligned, all of a sudden the data sets can't be shared and they cannot be used for the purpose that it was intended, and trade flows actually stop or slow, and we have increased dwell time, all of which negatively affect the types of commodities that we move in air cargo. On sustainability, you've heard already this morning about all of the different initiatives that we have on sustainability, so I'm not going to repeat that. What I want to talk about is some of the additional areas where air cargo contributes to achieving some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, absolutely committed to achieving the air cargo industry's net zero commitments, but in addition to that, looking at the utilization of single-use plastics. That's not terribly different from the rest of aviation, which is also focusing on that. However, the plastics themselves are different. We have different uses for them, and they're spread out throughout the supply chain. So there's some complexity in making sure that we find alternatives and that we reduce that use. The other is on the reduction of perishable loss in the supply chain, and that's the supply chain end-to-end from point of production onwards through to consumer, but certainly with air transport playing its role to reduce any loss that we might have there. To advocate for sustainable and efficient air cargo facilities. I think in the past there was a perception that air cargo facilities may not have been the most efficient buildings in the world, and what we need to make sure is that we're moving in that direction, that we're using modern approaches inside the facility as well as for its functioning. And lastly, around people. So attracting, developing, and retaining young talent within the air cargo industry. We have a program called the Future Air Cargo Executive Program to help kind of deliver on that. Touching on some of the perishable products that we were talking about and just special cargo more generally. So special cargo typically can represent up to 58% of the overall cargo revenue, depending on the business model of those airlines. And you can see that of the perishable products, 12% of them are fruits and vegetables, many of which are food. So focusing on and making sure that we minimize any loss that we might have throughout the supply chain is incredibly important, so that they connect producers to actual markets and consumers, so that the food and the perishable products actually end up in the mouths of the people who are looking to purchase them. A couple of other interesting figures. So when we talk about transporting dangerous goods, which represents nearly a third of all special cargo, 27% of that is actually lithium batteries. And it's increasing year on year as we purchase significantly more devices, either through e-commerce or other means. And just to highlight some of the great work that was done throughout the air cargo industry, over 13 billion doses of the COVID-19 vaccine were administered, many of which were flying by air, because that was the only way to connect these countries and the places that needed them. So what we've done just recently is we've released the first one is a new guidance on perishable loss reduction in air cargo, showing how much of a priority the timely delivery of perishable goods is to air cargo. It identifies 3 areas that are where we have commonality for loss. So that could be damage, that could be delays, and that could also be transit processes. That could either be customs processes or regulatory processes, but it could also be operational ones. And then it offers a number of strategies for the industry to actually reduce and mitigate any of that loss. And the second area is really around this future talent. So this is a paper that was actually written by our Future Air Cargo executive community. So these are young people under the age of 35 who are committed to attracting people to the industry, and they identified 5 different areas for the industry to focus on and put them in this paper. So these are the things that they think are incredibly important to focus on. And you can see that these are all the things that align to businesses, but that may not be in place consistently across the board. I mean, the pandemic has really shown us, and it's thrust into the forefront, that cargo changes and saves lives. The UN World Food Programme estimates that 362 million people will be in need of humanitarian assistance and protection in 2023. So that is a record high, unfortunately, a record high, and basically means 1 in 22 people will be requiring some form of assistance across the globe. So it shows just how important it is that we deliver as a community, as a global community, and air cargo absolutely responds to that. If we take the example of the earthquake response in Turkey and in Syria earlier in the year, there was an incredible amount of aid delivered, so 3,500 tons from 90 different countries all over the world to support that emergency. And then the other innovative thing that the air cargo industry did was set up these air bridges So the EU humanitarian air bridge, for example, has delivered more than 4,000 tons of aid over 165 different operation types to deliver for relief operations. The last thing I want to touch on is safety and security. First component, lithium batteries. Lithium batteries are found in just about every one of our electronic devices. And obviously, we want to take the data that's available around incidents, around issues, and have a continued risk management approach so that we can mitigate any risks. In addition to that, there have been some improvements around the transportation conditions for them to offer even more barrier and even more margin when we're transporting them. So one is a reduced state of charge, and the second is a new designation for vehicles so that we can identify vehicles when they're moving in transportation. Before, in particular, small vehicles would have just been considered battery-powered equipment, but they really do have different considerations. So that's going to be coming into place in the next couple of years. There'll be some transitional periods for aspects of that for industry to catch up, but really offering a significant improvement. The other is in ensuring that we have safety of the entire supply chain. So there are many different actors in the supply chain, and we need to make sure that the states who regulate them regulate and oversee the entire supply chain and not just one party or not unnecessarily one party. So there will be some changes to the ICAO Annex 18. They're finalizing what they're actually going to look like, but they provide a regulatory framework for regulators around the world to have oversight of the entire supply chain. And lastly, fire-resistant containers. So these are ULDs and other containers that we move around cargo in. We also move bags in them. And up until now, any fire-resistant container had a standard that it was meeting, which was for a normal type of fire, a fire that could occur anywhere. And we've now got one that is dedicated specific to address lithium battery fires, which will be going through the approval process. So we've made a number of significant improvements towards safety over the course of the year.